You know what time it is.
It's testimony time.
Yeah, it is. Listen, today's episode, we've got Will here with us. He's a good friend of mine. And, man, thanks for coming out.
Man, I'm so honored. Thank you for the invitation. This is going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So we want to get some of your backstory, but for all of you guys listening and watching this, we're going to be unpacking kind of Will's testimony, a little bit more about how it was 5 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you were diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Yes, sir.
Is that right? And so he's going to kind of unpack some of his story, and then now him being an adult, cancer-free, right?
Yeah, spoiler alert, I made it.
Yeah. And so we just want to dive into that, and really I want us to give the viewers some hope around how it is to be. How old are you now?
Almost 45.
Almost 45.
Yeah.
45, still going
later.
hard after Jesus.
Amen.
After what was probably one of the most toughest storms your parents and you might have ever walked through.
For sure.
And I think we see a lot of times that's not always the outcome. So,
right.
Give us some history, Will.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Northern California. I was born in Michigan, but we moved out there to California for my dad to start his business when I was about 9 months old. So I grew up in a Baptist church out there, going every Sunday. Obviously, when you're 5, you don't have any choice, but I continued doing that even afterwards.
Yeah.
I had a moment where God called me to himself when I was a young boy, right before my 5th birthday, actually. And I got to come home and pray with my dad to surrender my life to Jesus with my childlike faith. So that's something I've stood on ever since, even though that obviously has been tested throughout my life.
Sure.
But I'm really thankful for that foundation of faith that was laid in my life. And then, shortly thereafter, my mom was going into the doctor to discover if she was pregnant or not, and she was. Megan was coming along.
Yeah.
But the doctor said, "Yeah, you're pregnant, but what's up with that lump on your son's neck?" And so we started looking into it, and he said, this is something pretty serious. You want to get this looked at. You want to make sure to get it checked out. So we figured out the right connections to make and had an appointment, got a biopsy, and found out very quickly that it was Hodgkin's. Back then they called it Hodgkin's disease, but now they call it Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah. They attacked the lymph nodes, is that why?
Yeah, they could see it in my left lymph node. They took that out and eventually did a staging laparotomy where they go through and check out all the different internal organs and find where cancer is. And at that time, they would actually take the spleen out entirely most of the time. Now they've gotten a little more targeted in their therapies where they can just radiate or do chemo more precisely.
Yeah.
But even back then, the survival rate was pretty high, but it's still a very terrifying diagnosis and a very shaking experience for any parent to go through.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so you're 5 years old at this time.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember a lot of that time?
I do, actually. I have a pretty geographical memory just in general, and so I could walk you around the hospital still to this day. And I remember where all the different things were, especially I was treated in California at Children's Hospital Stanford, and that hospital, the little clinic where I was no longer exists, but the clinic is still going strong, and that was part of the miracle of this whole story is I was 2 hours away from where the book was literally being written on Hodgkin's disease
at the time.
So we were able to get in there with an amazing doctor who still is practicing today and is just an amazing man in his field.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's go back for a second. So you got the diagnosis. Probably it started seeming like just a domino effect of doctor's appointments, tests. What do you remember feeling around that time, like as the patient's perspective?
I remember hating needles. I still don't love them, but I have had thousands of shots over the years now, and so I've gotten used to them. I remember my parents helping to steer me in a lot of ways, in my emotions, in my faith, in knowing what was coming up. They would kind of prepare me for they would learn from the doctors because this was new to all of us, but they didn't hide anything from me, and they really helped me to understand what I was going to be going through, at least in 5-year-old language, and be able to take that on. And the doctor kind of encouraged us, this is going to be a marathon, but with any marathon, you just got to focus on the 100 yards that you're on. You don't have to focus on the whole distance. You got to just pace yourself little by little by little by little. You're going to get through it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Whenever you were like seeing your parents go through this, was there like a point in time where you saw them really, really worried, or did they seem like they were like pretty locked in on the Lord and just going hard after their faith during the whole time?
I don't recall seeing them worried. Obviously, this is 40 years ago.
Sure.
Either they hit it well or
Yeah.
I just don't remember. But I'm sure they had a lot of ups and downs emotionally. But what I do remember is just a sense of peace that came on us, not just because we trusted God, but because we had a natural family and a church family around us that were really, really supportive of us.
Yeah.
And so they would come over, they would bring us meals, they would take my sister out. We had another sister who was just a year younger than me. They would take care of her, they would take care of our home. And we just really felt the love of the community around us.
Yeah.
The big challenge back then, of course, for my parents was communicating with everyone. Now you can just post a video and everyone knows what's going on instantly. And back then it was all the phone calls and, 24 hours a day getting calls and trying to get updates from people.
For sure. Yeah, that can be overwhelming. I remember when Luca was diagnosed, it was very similar in response. Like we had this huge community ready to help, not knowing exactly what to do, and so meals definitely helped. If you're going through this, don't be ashamed to ask for help around meals, because oh my God, I could not imagine cooking during the stuff we were going through with Luca. Like that was wild. It was wild. I mean, you guys even brought us meals over multiple times and groceries.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, it was encouraging, and I think like I wanted to talk about this too, because I remember the first time this happened, and one of our first conversations around this was the support we had was incredible. And I kind of wanted to see like when so as the parent, right? I'm not Luca, so I'm not in his shoes, and I don't know exactly how he's feeling. But I know on my side, like as the parent, that support was so key and crucial for me to feel like even on the hard days, I can move to the next step. I've got these people that if I needed encouragement, I could call them. They would help encourage me, aside from the Lord, obviously. But for you as the patient at the time, did you feel like that? Like, could you feel that support, or did it just seem like there was always a lot of people around?
I sensed it. I think I knew I was at peace, knowing that there were people taking care of things. Not that I had to worry about it as a 5-year-old, but I just sensed that there was covering around us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a sense of security. The doctors did everything they could to help me feel secure. My parents certainly did. They spent, countless hours with me in the hospital, driving back and forth with me vomiting in the car and all that. So it was quite a ride. Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for even sharing like that vulnerable piece of your story. I think looking back at it, I remember when Luca was diagnosed, and I was thinking like, why is there no testimonies about surviving cancer patients? And now walking through this treatment, I'm starting to feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes I feel like maybe it's because of how rigorous these treatments are. It's exhausting. It's not a fun time. So it's not like you want to go back and be like, yay, like we did this, we did this, and so I'm just so happy that you're here and willing to share those things. I want to talk to you a little bit more about your faith, man, because I've seen you, like we go to church together. You're heavily involved in serving the Lord, and just, I mean, I've been over at your house, the way you treat your family, like you can tell like the Lord's presence is with you guys. You carry it well. And I think that we've seen, I mean, we mentioned this earlier, but we've seen a lot of people, me and Mel, through this that like used to be Christians, they used to be believers, and their kids have gotten these diagnoses, or they've gotten this diagnosis. And they leave thinking that like the Lord did this to them. And I was telling Mel, I'm like obviously we know the healing power of God. Like God could just in an instant, everything's fine. But I think about the story of Job, and that it wasn't like God did not do that to Job. He allowed that to happen when there was purpose in it. And I've like fought really hard over these last few months of like finding what's the purpose. I remember telling Mel, like, if we're going to go through this, we're going to bring people with us. Like we're going to find a way that people at the hospital encounter, our video team encounters the Lord, and testimonies that we get to share, like our house or whatever it is, like, or finances. Like today, literally somebody just sent me $500 in my bank account, like wild. And I've been praying for finances. Like, just crazy things happening, and sharing these testimonies. We're just seeing all of these people getting encouraged, but I'm really, really wanting to go after those people that like they've stopped believing or they're discouraged about the Lord because I haven't experienced him leaving me. And I know he's been good in the past. And I think like sometimes we get wrapped up in that, like the emotion of frustration. Why me? Why this? Why now?
Right.
And we almost put that on the Lord, like he did this. But what's helped me and Mel, I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but what's helped us is like focusing on, well, if it's me, then what do you have for us? Like what is it right now that you're wanting to do?
Right.
So instead of a why now, what now? Like what are we aiming for? What are we going for,
Right.
And now we're getting to see like the fruit of that with the people at the hospital, like coming to the Lord and getting to encounter his presence and the authority he's given us in that place. Mm-hmm. And so talk to us like how has it been for you? 5 years old, you walked through a really rigorous cancer treatment and diagnosis, and then here you are, 45. You've got 2 awesome kids, an awesome wife. Tell us how are you stuck with the Lord? How have you stuck with him this whole time?
I think thing one is cancer survivor, cancer patient. That's not my identity. That's a part of my story, but it's not my identity. I'm a son of God, and that's how I have to choose to see myself. And sons go through all kinds of things. I mean, you got 3 boys.
That's
you know what it's like.
Yeah.
They go through ups and downs and challenges, and we're the same as God's kids. But God loves us no matter what, and he has good gifts for us. He has good things for us. He has an amazing story that's already pre-known by him, but I get to discover it day by day.
Yeah.
And that's what's fascinating to me is God's got this amazing story that I'm a part of, and ultimately I'm not the main character. It's not about me.
Yeah.
It's not about even what God did in my life. It's about what he wants to do through my life and through the people that I touch and that I impact through the gifts that he's given me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it is just, establishing where, in the timeline of things you are. Is seeing that God is in eternity. He's got this amazing perspective. We're here in time. We just have a limited perspective on what he's doing. But even within the short time span of our lives, God's going to do some amazing things. And I hope people have hope about that God is going to use them despite their diagnosis or despite their challenges or their trials.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's a really good takeaway. You and me talked earlier before we even started recording about some of the side effects of the treatments with Luca. I remember sitting in the doctor's office and they're like, because of the radiation and where the tumor was, or in that area, it's around his pelvis, so most likely he's not going to be able to have kids in the future, things like that. You got a pretty dope last name. Right, Abraham.
Yeah.
We were talking about this, and I want you to just share with everybody like what you were talking to me about and your perspective, because I was really touched by that. I never pieced those things together, and we've known each other now for like almost a year, I think, or something like that.
A little over.
Yeah, and it just really like wrecked me, man. So share with us what you were talking about earlier.
That's powerful. Yeah. So at 5 years old, at least I wasn't worried about who my future kids might be. And I was just worried about trying to be a kid and when I could, get home and watch TV or something like that.
Yeah.
But as I matured, as I got married, started looking into these things, started pursuing having children eventually, and found that we were struggling. And so we talked to some specialists, and there's no real 100% conclusive evidence that it was because of chemo or radiation that we had struggles, but we had struggles. And ultimately, same thing, we went to the Lord, we prayed, we trusted him, we believed for miracles, but we started to realize that, again, it wasn't just about us. It wasn't about having a baby that looks like, my eyes and my wife's, hopefully more like her than me. But God started opening our eyes that there were other things out there. We explored some of the medical treatments available, but really settled on adoption as something that was striking to our hearts about God's heart as we explored that in the Bible. So we pursued that, ended up adopting adopting our daughter Lizzie, or excuse me, Liz, now that she's a teenager.
Oh, okay. Liz
from
now. Got it. Oh, mental note.
We adopted her from Russia back in 2011. She was about 18 months old out on our second trip when we brought her home. And then we adopted our son Caleb here domestically, just from Florida, when he was 4 years old.
Wow.
So, again, it's been amazing for us to see how this story of Abraham, a man who had to choose to believe the promises of God, that God was going to build a nation through him, that it wasn't about him. Even though he was 100, even though it was amazing to see God come through, even though he had to contemplate his body and look at the reality of where he was at, but it says in Hebrews that he grew strong in faith, right? Yeah. That he chose to believe God's promises. And it says in Romans 4 that he chose in hope against hope to believe God and to trust that God was going to bring about this miracle. Yeah. And through our whole struggle, looking at Abraham has been a real source of peace instead of a real source of condemnation.
Wow. That is incredible. What a story. And I love how you said, like, it's not about me, it's what God's wanting to do through me. And so, like, I would just encourage any of you guys listening, like, Will's stance on this is not, like, you could have very well just been like, no, God, I have to have my own kids, I have to, but you were so open to the fact that, like, hey, maybe the Lord wants me to do something different. And honestly, I can't imagine your family without your kids, like Kayla and Liz.
And they happen to look exactly like us. But that's
it's
just
wild,
beside the point.
It's so cool. But no, that's so amazing. And so I think, like, any parents out there, you guys are, worried about, maybe your kid's going through this, or your teenager, maybe you're going through this and you're worried about, we called it under fertility, right?
Yeah.
Under fertility. Things like that, or any of these side effects, like, remember that God has a bigger plan. Like, he sees some. I remember being we were believing for this house, and I remember coming to a point where, like, there was no way we were going to get it, and I was so confused. And I remember him telling me, like, I showed you I'm going to give you the house, and my ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. I mean, here we are having a podcast here. I had no idea this would come of a result of my son being, having this diagnosis. But the other key takeaway was not identifying as a cancer patient or I'm a cancer survivor, but as a son of God. I think that's so powerful that you said that, because it's easy when the world tries to diagnose and they put these labels on you. Right. Sometimes it's simpler, if that's a word, or more simple to, like, just adopt that and be like, yeah, that's who I am. That's what it is. But bringing it back to, I'm a son of God, I'm a daughter of God, and he's got a bigger plan, and just saying yes and seeing what he does. Like, I mean, you guys are one of the happiest, fun families to be around. Your wife cooks very well, so y'all come over anytime. I'll cook y'all food next time. But it's been such an honor to get to watch you guys, and just encouraging in this season for me and my family, because I see you here as a patient, before as the son of God, right? You're walking all of these promises of the Lord and believing and trusting in his plan, even when maybe everything else said you shouldn't, or you didn't have to. Right. And so, man, I just thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Is there any last minute things you'd like to encourage anybody with?
I think just as I was assembling a piece of furniture today, it's one of those things that you get that's flat packed, and so there's like 100 pieces to assemble one chair that rocks, and one of those things. And it just made me think about how someone designed this and knew how it had to go together. It knew what all these parts were. It knew that it was going to function in its ultimate way. And I am just trying to decipher these instructions and figure it out a little bit. Step one, put bolt A into washer B and slot C or whatever. And I only understand it a little bit, but I'm going to be able to see the final product at the end. I'm going to be able to see the chair and enjoy the chair and enjoy looking back at that journey of getting the chair made, even more than I might have if I had gotten the chair fully assembled. And I think that's just sort of a little bit of a metaphor that the Holy Spirit spoke to me, that's sort of how our lives are, that God's designed them. He's created us. He has got an amazing plan for each of us, and he wants to unveil that to us, but it doesn't always make sense along the road. But by the end of it, we're going to be able to see his complete plan and really be amazed at the unique way that he crafted each of us and the unique story that he crafted for each of us.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing
pleasure.
that. Yeah, thanks for being here. Listen, save this episode. Make sure you can go back to it. He was dropping a lot of heat over here that we're going to have to go back and listen to. So lastly, before we close, don't forget, if you want to be a part of Testimony Time, we're completely listener funded. So hop over to our website, itstestimonytime.com. Grab you a cool shirt, a hat. We've got hats coming.
Ooh.
They'll be out by the time this is out. But anyways, we've got hats on there, and it's going to be a great time. And any of the adult shirts that we sell, we're giving a shirt away for free to a kid going through treatment, as well as a Bible and a journal for their parents. That way they can start recording their own testimonies and start building their faith. But yeah, with that said, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.